Well, I was born on my father's reservation in New Mexico, which is the Mescalero Apache Reservation. And my mother is Cheyenne from Oklahoma, from western Oklahoma. And so growing up, I kind of went back and forth between both places, was mostly raised by family while my parents went to college and got their degrees. And I finished high school in Oklahoma and went to the University of Oklahoma for undergrad, where I got 2 degrees in journalism and Native American studies. And after that, I got a master's degree in public affairs at the University of Texas at Austin. And I'd always been interested in media, was always a writer, was always fascinated with kind of construction of image and story. And but I ended up, my first job out of university after grad school was working for the Ford Foundation in New York City, which at the time was the world's largest trust, the world's largest foundation. And I helped build their media program. So we did funding of documentaries, public radio, public television, not only in the United States, but we also had offices in Africa, Asia, Latin America, Russia. And so I partnered with a lot of our field offices to support a lot of regional, local programming in all of those global offices. And at the time, the Sundance Institute came to us and was interested in receiving funding from us. And so that was when I first met the people who run Sundance and found out that they had an Indigenous program. And unfortunately, we decided not to fund them, but we stayed in touch. And after I left Ford Foundation, I went to run to build a foundation, a new foundation of one of the Rockefeller family members. And this particular Rockefeller was interested in funding Indigenous language revitalization. So I was able to give a lot of tribes a lot of money across the United States to help them think about how to create new speakers of their languages, which was one of my particular passions, having grown up with both my languages, my mom's and my dad's. And so I did that for a while and kind of wanted to pursue again, story, like what it meant to construct stories. And when I was at the Ford Foundation, I had millions of dollars to give towards Native American film and television. But at the time, there was really no infrastructure within our country to kind of support, there's very few institutions, a lot of artists working, individual artists, but very few institutions to support them. So I kind of thought, well, if I want to have an impact on the Native media world within the States, then maybe I should move to a different level rather than a macro global scheme, maybe move to a very specific kind of smaller scheme. And that's when Sundance asked me to apply for this position that I have now, to come help them think through their Indigenous program and what it was that they were doing, what more they could be doing, what greater success that they could have with identifying and supporting Indigenous filmmakers. And so that's kind of how I ended up where I am. Done a lot of writing along the way, done some production, some producing, some writing, some directing here and there, just a lot of stuff that hopefully nobody will ever see. The major television corporations, all the networks, all have like diversity programs. And so they're trying to identify and locate Native people who are interested in working in television, but it's a lot more kind of more training programs. I don't know that there's necessarily anyone who's trying to conceive of network TV programs that could end up on air. I'm sure there are, but there's very little support, I think, especially that's coming from the tribal side. We do have, what's it called? We do have a regulatory commission as well, but no, there's not really any kind of policies like that enforce any kind of diversity within the states. Everything is so much more driven by capitalism and, the corporate model. Commerce. Yeah, and commerce and everything. However, on public television, which is, PBS. There is a Native American Public Telecommunications that is a funding agency that does support producers working in public television whose work, mostly documentary, will eventually end up on public television. And so there is that. There's the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and that agency which supports those efforts. But outside of that, in the corporate world, there's very little. I do go every year to a retreat that's hosted by HBO, which is intended for all of the what they call film and television executives of color, and they pick people who are vice president and higher throughout the whole industry to go to this one retreat and to kind of talk about business strategies for getting more of our content on the screen, whether it's television or film. And I'm the only Native American at that level, which is, I know there are producers working, there are people working in the industry at other levels, mostly producing, a lot of writing, some directing, but just on the executive side of the business, I'm sure there must be others, but I haven't run into them yet.